What's up, everybody? This is Sunit Sebastian from Sebastian Fitness Solutions, and as promised last time, in today's video I'm going to take you guys through the differences between the chest dip and the tricep dip, as well as explain to you guys a few reasons why one of these exercises serves the purpose for which it is done and is a great exercise to incorporate in your training program, whereas the other one is a horrible exercise choice for the purpose it's used for and really doesn't deserve any place in your training program. Alright? Now, a few things to note before we proceed. Number one, a movement trains a muscle if it involves performing the function of that muscle against resistance. Now, well, duh, right? As obvious as that is, unfortunately, some people still don't get that, and even more unfortunate is the fact that some of these people happen to be running YouTube channels and giving other people advice. But nevertheless, that's why I mentioned it clearly over here so you guys remember it. The second point is that in order to train a muscle optimally, it must be taken through full range of motion or at least close to it during the exercise. Now, you're aware of this. Most people are aware that full range of motion is the way to go if you want to really train the muscle for the best bang for your buck. Many people don't understand why, and I've actually done a video describing why full range of motion is important. So if you haven't watched that video, go ahead and check it out. The link will be in the description. But for the most part, we are all aware that full range of motion is the way to go when you're training, right? Finally, the third point to remember is that tension on a specific muscle can be increased if the movement is better aligned with the line of pull of maximum number of muscle fibers of that muscle. Now, this can happen in a joint which allows for adjustment in angles and across the movement. Some joints allow that, some don't. Some joints just simply don't allow change of angle like that. We'll get into that later on in the video. But just keep this in mind as one point because it's going to be relevant to this video, right? So anyway, moving on to the actual exercises, the first one I'm going to show you is the tricep dip. Now, the tricep dip, essentially you've got two parallel bars and you're grabbing onto them and you just dip down. As you can see in the video right now, I'm doing it. You're dipping down and just getting up into extension. And while doing so, you're trying your best to keep your elbows as close to your body as possible. Now, how much you can achieve that will depend upon how wide your lats are, because sometimes that can get in the way. Or even if the parallel bars you're holding onto are too far away, then that can make you flare out a little bit. But the goal is to keep it as close to your body as possible and make the movement primarily based on elbow extension, which trains the triceps. So that's how it's done. This is a side view that you can see right now. Very pretty much illustrated, you can understand. The second exercise we're going to discuss is the chest dip. Now, the chest dip is a modification of the tricep dip. Essentially what you do in this case is that you're doing the same movement, but instead of keeping the elbows close to your body, you're trying to keep it flared out as much as possible, right? So by flaring it out, you are going to incorporate the chest to some degree. You're going to create horizontal adduction and you're going to work the chest. So this is done in that way. You try to lean forward as well compared to the tricep dip in order to put a little bit more emphasis on the chest. That is what is suggested, and that's how this exercise is done. It's proposed to be done, right? So you can see the side view as well right now, and that's how it's done. Now, you guys know that I've discussed before in another video the reasons why, the problems with the chest dip and the reason why you shouldn't really do them. There was some negative feedback to that video. Some people have really strong attachments to this exercise, unfortunately. But for the most part, in this video, I'm going to take you guys through a little bit more detail and explain things along with representations, where you can clearly see and you'll be able to better understand what I was talking about, and also really compare that with the tricep dip itself and see how those two stack up. Right, so we're first going to discuss about the problems of the chest dip and then move on to the tricep dip. Okay, so here we go. Alright, so the very first issue when it comes to the chest dip happens to be with regards to the partial range of motion across horizontal adduction taking place in the movement. Now, horizontal adduction is the primary function of the pectoralis major, and in order for this movement to train the pecs, it must involve horizontal adduction taking place against resistance. So is that happening? And the answer is yes. Yes, indeed it is happening. Now, essentially when you go into the bottom position of a chest dip, your humerus moves away from the midline of the body, which is called abduction. And as you contract the pecs and you reach full extension, the humerus comes closer to the midline, and that is called adduction. So it is definitely taking place in this movement, and that means that pecs are definitely working in this movement. However, if you remember the second point that I mentioned at the start of the video, to note, to train a muscle optimally, it must be taken through its full range of motion or somewhere close to it, right? So, is that happening in the chest dip? Now, in order to take a look at that, a very simple thing that we can do is take a look at the full extension position in the chest dip itself. So here I am at the full extension position. At this point my chest is maximally contracted to as much as it can be in this particular movement, and I've reached as much horizontal adduction as I can in this particular movement. So in this position, how much horizontal adduction have I actually achieved? Is it close to how much as I could possibly achieve? So to take a look at that, we'll draw a line to the center of the body, represent the midline of the body, because adduction essentially is bringing the bone closer towards the midline. So we're going to draw a midline there. And how close is the humerus, or rather this is actually not very well represented. Let's draw another one here. There you go. Yeah, so this is the midline of the body, now somewhere close to it. And now what we're going to do is check and see where's the humerus. So the humerus is right here. Now this distance is the distance between the humerus and the midline. Now is this the minimum distance that we can create between the humerus and the midline of the body? And the answer is no. We can definitely achieve less distance. We can create more movement and bring this closer together to the midline. Physiologically it is definitely possible. So to compare and contrast with another exercise that is done for the chest, and that is any form of chest press done with the dumbbell. So dumbbell presses, you'll know that at full extension the dumbbells are brought closer towards the midline of the body, right? So here we go, and the arm itself is also a lot more closer towards the midline, because the wrist joint is somewhere right there in the middle. So you've got the arms moving in that diagonal right there. Of course, they have not reached as much adduction as you could without the dumbbell, because the dumbbells definitely interfere with reaching all the way, especially as the dumbbells get bigger. However, this is as close to full adduction as you can achieve in any form of compound movement for the chest. So let's say the elbow would be somewhere around here. So comparing the two, you'll see the distance between the humerus and the midline is a lot less compared to, in this case, as opposed to the chest dip. So the amount of horizontal adduction that you can achieve in the chest dip is again much less than what you can achieve with another exercise like the dumbbell press. So here itself you have one better alternative to training the chest than the chest dip straight off the bat, right? So of course this issue is not mutually exclusive to the chest dip itself, because of course this also exists in a very, very popular movement done for the chest, and that is the barbell bench press. So even in that case, the amount of horizontal adduction taking place is not as close to how much you can achieve in the dumbbell press, because the position of the wrist remains unchanged. It's on the bar. So you can't get as much adduction as you could get maybe in a dumbbell press. So which is why the dumbbell press is superior to the barbell bench press. So not to say that this issue of poor horizontal adduction is not exclusive to the chest dip. Not to say that this is a huge deal breaker. This is not the reason why the chest dip is, I have something negative to say against it, because this issue exists with the barbell bench press as well, and it's not like it's a make or break issue. However, it does exist, and it's a case of inferiority. So already we have a better option. But the real reasons why the chest dip I advise against it are for the reasons that are to follow. So take a look at those. Alright, so the second issue with the chest dip is about the misalignment of the line of movement of the chest dip versus the line of pull, the orientation of the muscle fibers of the pec major and their line of pull. Now this brings me back to the muscle masterclass episode I did on the chest, in which I discussed the anatomy of the pec major muscle and the orientation of its fibers. And in there we learned that the pec major actually has two subsections, namely the sternocostal head and the clavicular head. Now I'm going to try and represent this right here with a rough diagram. I'm hoping that this doesn't, I know it's not going to look very pretty, but bear with me on this. You guys get what I'm trying to say, so this is only for illustrative purposes. So let's say this is the pec, and the pec has two subsections. We've got the clavicular pec and the sternocostal pec. So let's say we've got the clavicular pec right here, so it's originating at the clavicle, running downward, inserting into the bicipital groove, right? And then you've got the sternocostal pec, which originates from the sternum and the costal cartilages, and inserting into the same common insertion point, which is the bicipital groove, right? I know, again, ugly drawing, but bear with me on this, guys. Come on. So right here. Yeah. Now going by and trying to figure out how well is this movement going to be aligned with the muscle fibers. If you guys remember in the masterclass that I did on chest, I described how aligning the movement with the line of pull of muscle fibers can influence how well you can train that particular muscle. And we touched upon the varying angles of the decline, incline, and flat, and the reasons why one angle preferably work the sternocostal head better versus why another will work the clavicular head better. This is not to say that the pec fibers contract individually, and that if you don't exactly match the line of movement with the line of fibers, that it's not going to get trained at all. That's not the case. The pec muscle contracts as a whole. However, depending upon how well the line of movement is aligned with the line of pull, you can get more of that tension that is actually the force generated, the amount of tension that is generated. More tension can be subjected to the actual musculature by aligning it to that movement, right? Simple as that. So if you take a decline press, it's not like there's no stress on the clavicular pecs. However, it's going to be a lot less considering that the line of pull is way off compared to the line of movement, right? So judging this exercise, a chest dip, and how well does it align with the muscle fibers of the pec? Now if you look at the movement and you see the press is somewhat close to a vertical press downward, right? If you factor in a forward lean factor, which is advised in a chest press, which is what is recommended to call it a chest dip, sorry, and if you factor that, most people with the amount of ability they can amount of forward lean they probably achieve, you will say that they can align the movement, say around these fibers right here, the costal cartilages, fibers originating from the costal cartilages right here, because it's somewhat still a relatively vertically downward push. Now, unless you're someone like a gymnast, you're not going to get anywhere even remotely close to even this region or align the movement to this region. You're not. It's not going to happen. So most people will still align the movement only over here. Now again, this is not to say that the pec doesn't work as a whole, but when you think about the actual contribution or the amount of tension that can be placed in this muscle itself, and you compare this with other movements in which you can easily align the movement with the line of pull, like a decline press or an incline press, then you compare the two and you see that this is clearly an inferior way to go about it. If you would try to align yourself to that those fibers, you would play a losing battle, because most people don't have the ability to do that. And even if you did, you'd be spending so much attention and focus in just maintaining that position that you'd be not putting 100% focus and attention in actually doing the movement, and with heavy weight. So this is definitely going to be an issue. And the simplest way you can go about doing it is just pick a bench, align it to the angle you want it to, and just do the movement. The pecs don't understand the difference. What they do understand is the line of pull and the amount of tension, and that you can easily control using a bench press, whether it's a decline bench, an incline bench, a flat bench. You can easily control it, as opposed to playing this balancing act on a dip station and trying to align it over there, which is anyway, no matter what you do, it's going to go and gravitate towards becoming a vertically downward push, which is aligned with very, very minimal number of muscle fibers of the pec major. So maximal tension is going to be placed only there. So this itself will give us a clear idea that compared to other exercises available for the chest dip is actually a very, very inferior choice. The amount of options we have are very limited. We've just got presses and flies, and in presses we've got different angles for decline, incline, and flat. But and you look at all of them, and they're, even despite having the previous issue, if you talk about a bench press using a barbell, even if it has an issue of incomplete range of motion, even then at least you can control the line of movement versus the line of pull, and you can progress easily without having to worry about playing a balancing act and trying to align yourself this and that way, etc., etc. So clearly this is a very, very inferior choice, and considering that the limited number of choices we have for the chest, this comes straight at the bottom, right? So this itself will disqualify the chest dip as any legitimate exercise for the chest itself. It just isn't very effective, especially in the context of other exercises which definitely prove to be more efficient and easier to progress in without having to worry about anything else than this exercise. So this is point number 2, and this itself for the most part should close the issue of the exercise being considered as an effective exercise for the chest, right? But the even more important issue, and which really seals the coffin, or puts in final nail in the coffin for this exercise, has to do with the third and final point that I have to discuss in this video, and that would be, alright, so up until now we've been discussing a couple of reasons why the chest dip is actually an inefficient exercise choice for building the chest, and especially when compared to other exercise options available for the same purpose. However, this last point I'm going to put forward to you guys is really going to show you that not only is this exercise an inefficient one, but it's also very, very risky and carries a huge injury potential. If you look at the movement of a chest dip done from the side, at the bottom position you'll see that the shoulder is placed in severe hyperextension. Now this hyperextended state is a very, very unstable, and delicate position for the shoulder joint. The shoulder joint, being the most mobile joint of the human body, is also the least stable and is highly injury prone, probably the most injury prone area in the human body in and out of the gym. So when you consider a movement like this, like a chest dip, which has a strength curve such that the bottom position is going to be the most difficult part of the movement, at that position your shoulder is in severe hyperextension. So a lot of stress is placed on the shoulder joint, the glenohumeral joint, as well as the support structures around it, whether it's the ligaments around it, whether it's the glenoid fossa, whether it's the rotator cuff muscle group that really holds everything together. All of these support structures are really, really taxed and stressed to a very great degree at this position, which is something you do not want, because in this position the reversal of the movement is really kicked off by the shoulder joint. So a lot of that stress, a lot of that initial tension is taken up by this joint. Very, very dangerous, very risky. And if you consider progressing in this exercise, of course, if you just do your body weight and you're easily handling it, it may not be that big of an issue. But like in any exercise that you'll be doing in your program, if you aim to progress in it, you aim to push yourself in it and really challenge yourself, this is really going to add up and can have a huge, huge risk for your shoulder joint. And once you get injured there, it's really going to cripple you very, very bad. So this gives us all the reason it needs to completely dump this exercise, not only in the name of inefficiency, but also in the name of safety. And the reasons I put forth pretty much qualify this exercise for the series that some of you guys know that I have called as the exercise graveyard. The chest dip most certainly falls under that category as well. And now that I've explained to you all the reasons, I pretty much can consider this to be an episode of exercise graveyard as well. But it's very clear, too dangerous, too risky, it doesn't even serve the purpose that it should. So from all the counts and all the reasons available, it is very, very clear that it's really, the chest dip is an extremely horrible exercise choice for building the chest, and in general to include in your training program, and therefore should not be considered. And that is why, this is the reason why the chest dip is actually a horrible exercise, and I do not recommend it. Now this brings us to the final question, and that is, what about the tricep dip? Because after all the issues that were brought about regarding the chest dip, the natural question that comes about is whether those same issues are going to hold true for the tricep dip as well, because the movements are so similar in nature. Now we'll take a look at each of the issues that were brought up about the chest dip and see whether or not the same issues hold true for the tricep dip. So the first issue that was brought about had to do with range of motion and partial range of motion across the function of the muscle being trained. Now in this case, the muscle being trained is the tricep, and the function it performs is elbow extension. So does this movement allow for full elbow flexion in the eccentric and full elbow extension in the concentric? And the answer is yes. If you look at the bottom position of the tricep dip, you will see that the elbow flexion you're reaching very near to complete elbow flexion. The brachioradialis is in contact with the lower portion of the bicep. There is very little room for you to go further. And in the concentric, it is very obvious and clear that when you reach full extension, the elbows are completely extended, and therefore you're reaching complete range of motion on that end, definitely. So unlike the chest dip, where there was a compromise in range of motion and a significant difference between what you can achieve in this and another exercise, in this case it's not the same. You're able to go into full flexion and full extension without any issues whatsoever. So that issue doesn't exist in this movement. The second issue we brought about was the misalignment of the line of movement versus the orientation of the muscle fibers. Now in the case of the tricep, this issue doesn't even hold true. It doesn't even come to question, and the reason for that being that the tricep actually acts on a joint such as the elbow joint, which is a simple hinge joint, and it only performs flexion and extension. There is no question of aligning the movement in a different way to target different or align it with maximum muscle fibers, because the fibers are vertically oriented, and there is very little. You can't make an angle adjustment for a up and down hinge joint. Unlike the shoulder joint, which is very mobile and actually has a very diverse degree of angles in which you can work, it's not the same in the elbow joint. The change in angle is achieved in the shoulder joint, not in the elbow joint. You can't do that. So this issue doesn't even hold true over here. So that's gone. And finally, the third and most important issue we brought up against the chest dip happened to be with the safety issue and hyperextension taking place in the movement. Is that happening in the tricep dip? And the answer is no. if you look at the bottom position of the tricep dip, the shoulder is in a fair amount of extension, but it is not hyperextending. The amount of stretch on the front delt is not nearly as much as that. It's completely manageable, and the shoulder is working in a range of motion in which it is comfortable and doesn't really cause a lot of stresses in the shoulder capsule. And if you compare and contrast this with the chest dip and tricep dip side by side, you'll see the clear difference in the amount of extension taking place in the chest dip versus the tricep dip. Hyperextension versus extension. Stretch in the anterior delt, making it weak in its weakest position, in the weakest position of the lift, versus a normal natural stretch in the front delt in the tricep dip. So completely manageable. So it's very clear that the issue that we're talking about in the chest dip doesn't really apply that much in the tricep dip, and it is completely manageable. So this issue isn't of any concern as well. So finally, hopefully this shows you guys that, despite being such similar movements, one of these exercises, which is the chest dip, really falls short in many ways, and it really is an inefficient way of doing things, as well as an unsafe way of doing things. Whereas the other one is definitely, it serves the purpose that it's supposed to do. After all, it takes the muscles with full range of motion. It trains the muscles function. And compared to other options available, the other option for compound movements for the tricep is the close grip bench press, and it's very similar to this tricep dip. Both of these involve shoulder flexion and elbow extension. So it's, you have one that does the job that it's supposed to do, whereas the other one doesn't do so much. So I really hope that this video clarifies this to you guys. The reason this video is created is, of course, to answer the question and confusion you guys had regarding, why is one not a good exercise and still the other one I'm doing, why is that? Hopefully this shows you that one of these exercises, it does what it's supposed to do. It does it serves the purpose it is meant to serve, and it does so without creating any issues. Whereas on the other hand, the other one really doesn't do nearly a good job for the purpose it's used for, and it is also unsafe. So hopefully this really shows this to you guys and answers your questions. And for those of you who didn't have this question, at least, I hope that you still learn something new and can take away something from this. So I really hope that you found this video informative, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, what are you waiting for? Click that subscribe button right now. Join the channel. I'm sure you're not going to regret it. And if you guys have any questions regarding whatever's been discussed in this video, please feel free to post them below in the comments. I would love to hear from you guys. Ask your questions away. I will do my best to clarify them. And let me know what you guys think, about the video as well. So leave some feedback in the comment section. I'd love to hear that from you. Alright guys, that's pretty much all I have for you right now. I will see you in the next video. Peace out.